Hey everyone, welcome back. So you all wanted to really dig into faith-based entrepreneurship, huh? Well, buckle up because we're diving headfirst into a book that ties these two worlds together in a fascinating way. It's called Divine Systems: The Christian Path to Entrepreneurship. And let me tell you, this book is dense-y.
It really is.
But don't worry, we've sifted through it and pulled out the most interesting insights just for you.
That's right, we have. The author, Dr. Kulakani Sabanda, is quite the entrepreneur and scholar himself, and he really lays out a compelling case for aligning your business with, well, your beliefs.
And he starts off strong, right out of the gate, by asking, what if we looked at God as, well, the ultimate entrepreneur?
You know, it's not as strange as it might sound initially.
Right.
Chapter 2 really dives into how God created the actual systems he put into place. Think about the natural world, right? God didn't create each individual tree. He created the system of trees.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Seeds, growth, decay, renewal.
Right, yeah.
It's this self-sustaining cycle.
It's like he built the ultimate business model right into, like, the fabric of creation.
Exactly. And it's not just trees. You see it everywhere. The sun and the moon, the tides, even the seasons. All these systems set in motion from the very beginning.
And they work with this incredible consistency. It's amazing.
It really is amazing.
But how can we, like, as entrepreneurs, actually learn from this divine approach to systems? I feel like there's something profound here, but I'm struggling a little to grasp the practical application.
Well, I think the core message here is that we as entrepreneurs, we shouldn't get so bogged down in every tiny detail of our business, but instead focus on creating systems that work, that function smoothly and independently, much like the natural world does.
So, like, instead of constantly working in our businesses, we need to find ways to work on our businesses.
Yes, exactly.
Kind of like, God stepping back on the seventh day.
Yeah.
Confident in the systems he had put in place.
Precisely. And think about the story of Adam, right? God creates the Garden of Eden, these incredible systems, and then he puts Adam in charge. Not to micromanage every plant and every animal,
right.
but to manage, to oversee.
It makes me think about, like, delegation and how important that is in any business, but especially when you're trying to, like, empower the people you work with.
Absolutely. Delegation is huge EE, both in, well, the Bible, but also in any successful business. It's not just about handing off tasks, though. It's about empowering your team, giving them the tools and the trust to really thrive.
Okay, so we're starting to see how this whole idea of divine systems can actually translate into practical steps for entrepreneurs. Like, we need to think systemically, delegate effectively, and trust the processes we put in place. But how do we actually build these systems? What does that look like day to day?
Chapters 3 and 4 get into that, and honestly, it's surprisingly straightforward.
Yeah.
One of the big things they emphasize is standardized procedures, SOPs.
SOP, so like God's consistent laws of nature, but for our businesses.
Precisely. Just like those laws keep everything in order, businesses need clear procedures that are written down so that anyone can follow them.
It takes the guesswork out of things.
Exactly.
It's like having a recipe for success that everyone can follow instead of having to reinvent the wheel every single time.
That's a great way to put it. And just like, God resting on the seventh day after putting those systems in place, well, SOPs free us up to think bigger picture, to focus on the strategic vision of our business. Because we don't want to be stuck constantly tinkering with the small stuff.
Which reminds me, earlier you mentioned automation. Could we maybe circle back to that?
Absolutely. So think of it this way. Just as the sun rises every single day, without any help from us.
Right.
Technology can handle a lot of those repetitive tasks for us in our businesses. It frees us up to be more creative, more strategic in our work.
So it's not just about working harder, it's about working smarter.
Exactly.
Leveraging technology.
Exactly. And, this idea of efficiency, it extends to how we structure our teams, too. The book really stresses this point. Even God delegated. He created angels, and he gave them specific responsibilities, right?
So teamwork really is a divine principle. But I think what's so interesting here is that it's not just about having a team, but it's about empowering that team, just like God empowered Adam to manage the garden.
Exactly. And that's a crucial point. Effective leadership, leadership that's rooted in trust and empowerment, that is so essential for building you could say a divine system that truly thrives.
And speaking of thriving, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on the financial side of building a business.
Yeah, and that's often a huge point of anxiety for entrepreneurs, right?
Oh,
But I have to say, this book doesn't shy away from it, not at all. It actually tackles it head on. you know? And the advice it gives is really rooted in, well, biblical principles.
Okay, so we're not talking about some kind of like prosperity gospel, get-rich-quick scheme here. This is about practical, faith-based financial advice.
Exactly. And chapter 5 is a great example of this. It really hones in on the story of Joseph, Joseph in Egypt.
Oh, right, yeah. Joseph, he's the one who could interpret dreams.
Yes.
He could kind of see the future.
Right. But the book makes this really interesting point. Joseph didn't just interpret the dream. He came up with a plan.
Oh, interesting.
He took his understanding of that famine, that was coming.
Right.
And he used it to create a whole system to save Egypt. That wasn't just like divine intervention. It was strategic foresight.
Right, which any entrepreneur can try to develop. We might not all get these like prophetic dreams about the stock market.
Yeah, exactly.
But we can cultivate that same like foresight through careful planning. So how does that translate to like day-to-day money management?
Well, chapters 5 and 6 get into some pretty like timeless wisdom on that front. And one of the core principles,
Diligence.
So not just like waiting for inspiration to strike, but putting in the work consistently. Yes, exactly. It's about making those careful decisions, being disciplined with spending, and really focusing on long-term sustainability, not, those quick wins.
It's funny because it makes me think of that quote. I can't remember who said it, but it's like, the harder I work, the luckier I get. But it's not actually about luck. It's that consistency.
Exactly. And then there's the topic I think a lot of us dread, debt.
Yeah.
The book has a really interesting take on this. It doesn't condemn debt completely, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
But it really stresses the importance of careful management.
Which makes sense because even in the Bible, there are stories about managing debt well, using it responsibly. It's about not letting it become a burden, I guess.
Right, exactly. It's finding that balance. How do you leverage resources to help your business grow while staying within those healthy financial boundaries?
Right. So we're being diligent, we're managing debt responsibly. What was that third principle again?
Generosity. And, I think a lot of times people hear that word and they think just like, giving money away.
Right.
But the book takes it a step further. It talks about stewardship, which is really how we manage all our resources,
It's interesting.
Our time, our actual talents, our finances, everything.
So investing in your community, using your success to like really make an impact.
Yes. And it ties back into that idea of aligning your business with your faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's about using those gifts and resources, not just for yourself, not just for your own gain, but to further something bigger than yourself.
That's powerful. But it can feel overwhelming sometimes. Like, where do you even start? We've talked about systems, finances, but what about like the actual business idea? How do I know what kind of business to even pursue?
Well, that's where it gets really exciting. The book dives deep into the idea of God-given talents and how those can actually guide your entrepreneurial journey.
Right, because earlier we were talking about God as like the ultimate entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Creating these amazing systems.
Yeah.
But he also created each of us with unique gifts and passions, right?
Exactly. And the book encourages us to stop looking at those gifts as just hobbies or interests,
Right.
but as potential seeds for a business.
Like in Exodus, the story of Bezalel. He was chosen by God to build the tabernacle, and it was because of his craftsmanship. Like he was literally designed for that task.
Exactly. And they use his story to drive home a powerful point. God equips us for the work he's called us to do. He doesn't just give us a vision. He gives us the skills, that passion to actually make it a reality.
Okay, that's super inspiring. But how do we actually translate that into a business idea? Like, I might love to bake cakes for my friends, but that doesn't necessarily mean I should open a bakery, right?
Right. And the book acknowledges that. Just because we enjoy something, it doesn't automatically mean it's a viable business.
No.
There has to be a need for it.
So passion is important, but we've got to put on our entrepreneur hats and be realistic about the market.
Yes. It's about finding that sweet spot, where those God-given talents line up with a real need in the marketplace. And the book gives some really practical tips on how to actually identify those opportunities.
So it's about finding that balance. The divine inspiration, our own unique skills, and then some good old-fashioned market research.
Yes, exactly. It's approaching all of this with faith and wisdom,
So, okay, let's say we've identified our strengths, we've spotted that market need, our finances are in order, we're feeling really good, we have that faith. But there's still that leap, that step out into the unknown, that leap of faith. It's exciting, but man, it's also terrifying, Even when you feel like you're following that call, that plan, there's always going to be that little bit of doubt,
Yeah.
that fear.
Oh, absolutely. And, Dr. Sabanda, he doesn't pretend like that fear isn't there.
Right.
He totally acknowledges it. It's a natural part of this whole thing, even for people who, who feel that call.
Yeah, for sure. In Chapter 7, he talks about Truett Cathy, right?
Yeah.
The founder of Chick-fil-A. I mean, talk about a bold move, closing on Sundays in the fast food industry.
It was a decision that really came down to his faith. And it seemed, well, at least on the surface, like wouldn't be a smart business move.
Right.
But it ended up being one of the things that really set Chick-fil-A apart.
It's like that whole, like, if you build it, they will come, but with, a side of chicken and waffle fries.
Exactly.
But it's still scary to think about taking a risk that big. So what does the book say about those moments when, like, your faith and your practical side seem like they're at odds?
Chapter 7 is really good, actually. One of the big takeaways is that a leap of faith shouldn't be a blind leap.
Okay, so we're not just like throwing caution to the wind and hoping for the best.
Right. The book is all about balance. It encourages you to plan, to really do your research, to count the costs literally, and then when it's time to make that move, you do it, but you do it with confidence because you've done everything you can to prepare.
And that's where prayer comes in, right? That's where you seek that guidance.
Yes, prayer is so important, but it also talks about having good counsel around you.
So not just like business mentors, but people who like share your faith, who get that desire to honor God through your business.
Yes, exactly. Mentors, other entrepreneurs, even family and friends, people who can support you, who can offer advice, especially when you're feeling that doubt creep in.
Because it will, right?
Yeah.
Doubt is going to come no matter what. Even with the best plans, even with the strongest faith, there are always going to be challenges.
Always. Challenges, setbacks, they're part of the journey. But, the book really makes this point. Those tough experiences are often the times we learn the most.
That's so true.
It refines you. It makes you stronger. And, it can actually deepen your understanding of why you're doing this in the first place.
Man, that makes me think about legacy. It's not just about building a successful business. It's about the impact, the good that you put out in the world.
That's a great point. And it's a central theme in the book, really. Entrepreneurship as a way to further God's work. It's about creating something meaningful, something that lines up with those values.
It reminds me in Chapter 8, when he talks about legacy, he uses the example of the Green family.
Oh, yes.
The founders of Hobby Lobby.
Yeah.
And they built this hugely successful business.
They did.
And they stayed true to their faith, even when it wasn't easy.
Even when it caused controversy, even when it was difficult. It's such a great example of how deeply you can weave faith into a business.
Yeah.
And, their story might not resonate with everyone, and that's okay.
Right.
But it really does highlight that one of the book's biggest messages, entrepreneurship, it can be about so much more than just the bottom line.
It's about stewardship.
Right.
It's about using the gifts, the resources that, we believe God gave us to make a difference.
Yes.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into divine systems, what's the one thing you hope listeners take away from it?
I think if people walk away remembering just one thing, it's that entrepreneurship. When you approach it through this lens of faith, it can be so fulfilling. You're seeking guidance. You're using those God-given talents, and you're building something that really means something to you and to the world.
That was beautifully said. It has been so great diving into divine systems with you. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this conversation has sparked something in you, whether you're just starting out on your own entrepreneurial journey or you're just looking at your work through a new lens. And we'll see you next time.